Hello guys, welcome to the channel. This is the story about what if Naruto was the Jinchuuriki of 9 Bijuu x Highschool DxD Part 10. Before I start the video, please subscribe the channel for more fanfiction video and please share this video with your friends. This story was written by Havoc Tear. With any more interception, let's start the video. Mariana's trench. Dryag stares down at the darkness of this world's deepest trench. He had been maintaining this barrier around him for the last few hours and can't get any closer to the entrance. If he was in his true form, this would have been far easier to handle, but Naruto isn't capable of that yet. It won't be long until he is, and truly, the campaign to fix the world is going to take off and nothing will be able to stop them. Albion will be missing out on the badassery that will no doubt take place. His help will be needed if they'll have to fight against the likes of Office and Great Red, but he doubts the big guy is interested in stopping them. He won't help either though, but that is fine too. Fighting all these new, young players is going to be thrilling, and correcting injustices along the way is just a happy happenstance. Grinning, Dietrich suspects he'll earn a new title like Justice Dragon Emperor or the Dragon of Flaming Balance or something. Sounds great in his humble, scaled opinion. Heck, he might get the Six-Path Dragon title too. Now that would be epic. Movement spotted down below. It was about damn time. Dietrich loses his smirk as he focuses on his arriving guests and knows he'll have a limited chance to get this right. He doesn't have infinite power right now. Maybe that is why they made him wait. Seeing if they could weaken him further. How foolish. Perhaps he should have brought Isobro with him. Doubt they'd be able to handle them both, even in their current weakened forms. Dietrich had to fight back the bloodthirsty smirk threatening to break out at the thought of fighting alongside the pacifist. Yuki has told him a few stories of the turtles' might when pissed off, and they got even him more than a little excited about seeing him fight in person. Another time, as they were getting closer, Showtime's Six-Path Dragon of Justice. Kyoto Mountain Shrine. Yasaka led the sages and their charges through the main building of the shrine and her personal residence she was sharing with Lord Sage. Though, maybe she'll have to use one of the other names when referring to him now. Menma or Narian. The vixen knew full well that they were fake names and was rather frustrated at the fact he was unwilling to part with his real one. Reaching the second floor, the group came face to face with the two hunters of Artemis, who ran up to the sage and stopped before Felix spoke. "Sorry, Lord Sage, for not aiding you in your battle and failing as your guards." Haku raised a brow at that. Aoi too, though Izuna looked to his fellow sage with a raised brow and asked, "You have these kids as guards?" Both Greek semi-immortals glared at the Uchiha with nothing but loathing and distaste, while Naruto sighed while waving the man off, saying, "Not by choice. Beat their patron goddess, who happened to be of the moon and forests, and now said goddess seems to think my protection requires them." Gestured to the two hunters with his head, and the Uchiha looked them both over, walking past them both, but Izuna asked, "How strong are they?" Naruto shrugged, moving after him with the others following swiftly. "Haven't checked yet. The ones I battled were Chunin level or so." Izuna chuckled, shaking his head, saying, "Pathetically naive." Haku followed shortly after her friend, and asks, "Rather low. Even back at the bridge we were battling at a higher level. Are you sure?" Looking to the blonde at her side, who shrugged again, Naruto repeating, "I haven't checked, okay?" Those in the know all nod to that, the others confused by the terminology and unsure what to make of it. Yasaka reached the corridor that Naruto's room was on and gestured to the ones opposite his and offered, "These are all free to use, so please feel free to select them." Izuna, Aoi, and their kids do so promptly. Naruto unseals his door, only noticed by Haku, who raised a brow at the level of security he was maintaining. He really did not trust anyone anymore. Guess she'll have to change that. Yasaka gawked as the Yukiheim followed Lord Sage into his room, and he didn't seem to notice or care. Moving over after them, she stood in the doorway and watched as she unloaded a duffel bag of kimonos on one of the low drawers, the one by the window. Lord Sage was bare-chested briefly, and replaces his currently damaged t-shirt. Again, He looked perfectly comfortable with the arrangement and neither even seemed to care that the other, or she, were there. Yasaka just listened and watched. Naruto glances back after pulling down his t-shirt, spotting Haku unloading her kimonos into the low drawers and raised a brow while informing. You know there's a wardrobe over there, right? Pointing to the door opposite them, and Haku looked over at it briefly. Curiously, the Yukihime strolled over and pulled open the wardrobe door, spotting its barely used state. Within the walk-in storage was a scarlet haori, black flames donning the bottom lining and a line of elemental kanji spelling out Sage of 6, vertically down the spine. Opposite it was a well-worn hidden leaf Anbu armor set, lacking the mask, on a mannequin beside which was 3 swords. 2 were clearly battle-tested, a shinobi tanto, although a bit long for standard issue from what she recalled from her father's lessons, and a common-looking sword radiating power she doesn't recognize. The 3rd sword looked clean as can be with a letter attached to the handle and was away from the other 2. A gift of some kind likely and purposely left alone so Haku won't pry either, and just nodded, claiming, I can use this then. Naruto replied from sitting on the bed, inspecting the damage to his slashed, singed, and blooded t-shirt. Thought it was implied. I travel light. You know how it is. Haku nodded absent-mindedly as she returned to her bag, indeed knowing the life on the road better than anyone in the present company. So, I'll take then. Feel free. Naruto's response as he places down the shirt on the bed, getting up to find his sewing kit before halting midway across and looking at Yasaka, asking, Is there something you need, Yasaka-san? Snapping out of her stupor at how at ease Naruto is with this newcomer, Yasaka looked to the sage and replied, Ah, right, yes. We have 3 new arrivals that I feel you should meet. Naruto nodded calmly, asking, Seeing as we have new members too, perhaps at dinner we could all greet one another at once. Yasaka inclined her head as Aoi appeared beside her and asks Naruto, Hey Narian, the Cubs, the room over, wanted to know about the cool scroll move you showed them. Naruto's sweat dropped at how they explained the intricacies of his clan's art so childishly and unimpressively. His irritation bled through his facial expression, earning a suppressed chuckle from Haku, getting a glare from Naruto that lacked any intent. He looked back at the black bear and nodded. Sure, might as well do this now instead of later. As he reached the door, he looked back at the Snow Princess and said, Don't touch my kit. Haku just smiled at him in response that earned her a light glare that she eventually waved off, and he left with Aoi promptly after that, leaving Yasaka and Haku alone. After a moment of silence and the Yuki came back out from the wardrobe, Haku spoke up. You do not like me, right, Vixen? She hadn't stopped moving her stuff when addressing the leader of the Yukai people, and Yasaka was more than a little annoyed by that fact but buried it down as she spoke diplomatically. You are mistaken, Yukihime-san. I am simply overwhelmed with this abrupt gathering of sages. Within my own abode, no less. The last time anyone had reportedly seen a sage at all, according to our records, was at least 400 years ago. Haku returned to the main room and now faces the Kyuubi directly, having finished her unpacking, and had sensed the lie but continued. I see. Well, as Narian is here right now, we shall remain too, but when he leaves we shall remain at his side. I will remain at his side. We may have a few hundred years together, but... Yasaka cut her off, confused. A few hundred? Lord Sage is only human. He isn't like... Haku raised a brow and a brief flash of confusion passed her features before realization hit her. This Kyuubi did not know. Yasaka caught this and was wondering why but couldn't ask as the others appeared behind her with Naruto appearing with an intense glint in his eyes at the Yuki. The Yukihime simply smiled, moved forward and allowed Naruto to close his door, sealed shut, just like the other sages. Aoi looked to the lone vixen, asking, Are we going for dinner now then? Yasaka nodded distractedly and gestured to follow. It was clear what was on her mind, Haku's non-answer to Lord Sage's suspected lifespan and the fact that he was human and not a Yukai. Mess hall. Everyone was in the mess hall awaiting for them when Yasaka leads in the second group of new arrivals. Naruto appeared next, Haku at his side and hunter guards at his back. The Yukihime giggled delicately at a joke the sage made, perfectly timed for their entrance into the hall and gaining everyone's attention. Her giggle was delicate, refined, and melodic enough to swoon the weak-willed. A few of the priests gained a nice tint of pink to their cheeks along with a particular bane of Naruto's existence in the form of Issei Hyodo. Honestly, how did a kind and caring woman like Miki birth such a perverted fool? Naruto would never know. Izuna and Aoi followed directly after the blonde, their kids between the two sets of overpowered nature users, meaning they were currently the most protected of the shrine at the moment. Due to all the new arrivals, the sages, who originally sat at the head table with Yasaka, moved over to the fourth, previously empty table in the hall that was directly opposite the devils and adjacent to the renamed Yukai table. Much to Yasaka and Kuroka's disappointment, Naruto chose to sit with his fellow sages, but more specifically, next to that Yukihime. After everyone had settled, Yasaka stood and cleared her throat to announce, "With everyone here, allow me to introduce." She gestured to the small, seven-tailed cat, then to the old man with an unusual shaped head, and the vixen continued. "This is Nurarihyun and Magari, leaders of the Kanto Yukai Association." Magari's eyes flowed between the Nekoshus, swearing they were both devil hybrids last she heard, but now the older daughter of her acquaintance was very clearly lacking said devil part and was a full-on Nekosho. An exciting development to be sure. Nurarihyun, however, just smiled warmly towards the sages, earning smiles back from the kids and Aoi. The shinobi sages, however, were not so easily swayed. Naruto, Izuna, and Haku did not trust this man, as the aura he was giving off was that of a gentle grandfather of all, which meant to these trained assassins that he could not be trusted. Yasaka then gestured to the devil table where Graphia was standing beside Rias. Then the gray-haired Lucifuge bowed to the room and announced, "My name is Graphia Lucifuge, Queen and Maid of Satan Lucifer. I am here at his behest to tend to Lady Gremory and act as her chaperone until the meeting of the pact. Pleasure to make your acquaintance." Everyone nodded before looking to the new table, and so Naruto led the standing, with even the kids following his lead, as he spoke. "Well, you all know me as Lord Sage, Narian, or Menma. So yeah, I am the sixth path sage." Izuna spoke next, stern as they come. "I may be addressed as Natsuo, fire sage." Aoi rolled her eyes at her marshmallow, acting hard, but did not dwell on it long as she introduced. "My name is Aoi. As you can see, I am a black bear yukai, but I am also the sage of rock and earth. Nate here is also my husband." She gently takes up Izuna's hand and he nods to confirm that. The surprise at the news was twofold and Aoi wasn't expecting anything less. Firstly, all her kin, black bears that is, are all gathered in this room, last she checked. Her children and her are potentially the last of their kind. Secondly, it was clear she was, at one point, a regular bear yukai and had elevated to sagehood somehow. This knowledge had long since disappeared from the world and she did not feel like sharing it. Like her husband and fellow sages, she had no reason to trust these people. She gestured to her three kids, stating, "My eldest, Hikari. My middle cub, Tajima. My youngest, Itsuki. We will be in your care for a little while." Haku spoke next, clearing her throat before smiling gently as she offered, "My name is Miyuki. Yes, I am a Yukihime, a higher form of Yukiana. Though, I am also the sage of ice and wind." Haku, like Izuna and Aoi, did not mention their more advanced titles purposefully. Naruto had warned them ahead of time, so the fact that Haku is of stillness and gale, Izuna was of the phoenix, and Aoi was of rocks and minerals was being kept under lock and key. Seeing as none knew what six paths meant, Naruto was safe regardless. Those he did not go with Yasaka to find the sage were surprised that there were more sages. One of fire, one of rock and one of ice and wind means that they may be more. To add insult to injury, they are clearly working under Lord Sage, but in what capacity is yet to be determined. It was safe to say the three biblical factions were about to receive an interesting report post-dinner, and one faction plans on committing suicide via sage. Underworld. In a smaller meeting room to the council chamber sat the four Satans and heads to only the most influential houses. This being the Bijuu, Ichiei, Gremory, Phoenix, and Astaroth. This was an emergency summon on behest of Satan Lucifer based on information he just received from Graphia, Rias, and Akano. Thus, when Searsex stood from his chair, everyone looked to him as he spoke. We have received numerous reports and most are not in our favor. Not seeing any interjections, he continued. Firstly, the good news. The pact has been delayed an extra week due to increased interest from other factions. Gives us all more time to prepare. Everyone nodded to that. It was indeed good news for them, and now plans were being worked out, so Searsex carried on. However, that is all the good news we have received. Graphia, Rias, and Akano have all submitted to me reports that are incredibly disturbing on multiple fronts. Zekrom asks promptly. Do not keep us in the dark, boy. This is already an unusual occurrence to call us at this unholy hour. Getting nods from the others, so Searsex sighs and spills. The Leviathan House has proposed a deal to Menma which he has not yet disagreed against. The room still and Zekrom's gaze hardened, looking to his descendant. What is the nature of this deal and what is it worth? Searsex was swift in his reply. We don't have the finer details, as it seems they had already discussed that. However, Kateria Leviathan has offered her house's loyalty, safe harbor, and training should Menma accept her request. A contemplative silence fell on the room at that announcement, though it was Lord Phoenix who spoke first. Training? What could she possibly have that he doesn't already know? Many nodded at that, which is why Searsex elaborated. According to Akano, it has something to do with dark magic. She showed it to him and he seemed to consider it. Ajuka scratched his chin in confusion, asking, Dark magic? He is a chakra user, so he can't use it. We are missing something here. Seraphal nodded to that, replying, Most definitely. If it was something that simple, we could have offered it sooner and with greater certainty of fulfilling his needs in that regard. Everyone nodded, as the stronger devils all have access to such basic magical energy that was innate in their species. Zekrom asked next, moving things along. What else seems to be the issue? Yes, the old faction making a deal with this sage is troubling but hardly noteworthy. Searsex nodded, continuing. Right. Well, it seems that the place the sage was staying was attacked a few hours ago. Many raised brows at that, assuming none would be foolish enough to take on the sage in a place protected by the Shinto and Yukai factions. Falbium asked for the room. Who was stupid enough to? Searsex cut him off, stating simply, they were attacked by a trio of new sages. Gasps from the whole room at large at the thought of more like Menma appearing, and more importantly, Zekrom asked, who and what was the outcome of the battle? Retaking his seat beside his fellow Satan, Searsex reported. It seemed to be a heavyweight fight, with Menma fending off only one of them whilst the other two stepping in to break them off. He pulled up images of the scarred battleground and the large damaged section of forest, scorched and melted rock with large boulders littering the area. It was an impressive sight for a skirmish. Searsex explained further. From what we have been told, Menma and this new sage by the name of Natsuo went head-to-head with swords of unknown origin, with this being the result of their battle. Falbium asked promptly, still studying the pictures. Swords? From what I remember, Menma has the Caliburn sword, yes. Searsex nodded, replying smoothly. He did not use it, but rather. Another picture popped up, displaying Benihime before Menma picked it back up, and even through the picture you could see the wind swirling around it. Searsex explained. He used this one. From what Rias and Akano overheard from Natsuo, this sword is made up of a special kind of red metal unique to Menma's family, and this sword was passed down by his mother to him. Lord Astaroth commented after several moments of silence, remarkable indeed. The others nodded, as Searsex explained. According to Menma himself, it is called Benihime and was not made for himself but rather his mother, making it an heirloom. We do not know what runes or magic it is capable of, however when Knight Kiba Yuta attempted to hold it. Another image appeared and showed the sliced-up arm of the blonde Gremory knight and the bishop attempting to heal the wound. The red-headed Satan finished. It seems to be able to strike out at anyone who isn't Menma. That won't be a problem. Lord Phoenix stated that confidently, drawing eyes as he continued to stare at the elegant weapon. Wind is within my house's domain, only feeding our flames, so not to worry. We shall study it should the chance present itself. Zekrom spoke in response. Assuming you can get close, as an heirloom, it is highly unlikely that weapon is stored anywhere less than absolutely secured. He looks to the Satan, ordering, "Where did it come from?" Sears replied swiftly. Rias and Akano reported that he had summoned it suddenly and without warning. Before anyone knew it, he had it in hand and everyone's battle instincts forced them back. The old devil did not like that news but gestured for the Satans to move along, and the red-head Satan did so. During the fight between Menma and Natsuo, the small part that Grafia witnessed, it would seem that Menma was utilizing a mastery of water we did not know he had against the scarlet flames of Natsuo. This caught everyone's attention but none like the Cetri in the room who both call out, "What?" Sears nodded grimly, as he recalls Grafia's report. My queen only witnessed the brief engagement within the mountain shrine, and only when they stopped to strike as, according to her, they were fighting at speeds that would make us all look like children. Zekrom stood up growling, "You cannot be serious about this." Sears sighed, slumping back in his seat as he informed. Grafia said that she couldn't completely keep track of their movements. I have no reason to doubt her. All fell silent for a few moments before Serafal asks, "You said that Menma was using a high level of water?" Sears nodded, sitting straighter as he began. From what we know of Menma is that he typically uses wind-based chakra attacks. We have documented him using fire and earth but to a far lesser extent. Rias has since learnt that Menma is actually far more capable than we thought and can in fact use any element of nature. He looks to Serafal, continuing. According to a test he took with Lady Yusaka's daughter, his primary element is wind, however his secondary is water. According to Grafia, he has a level of mastery to it that she hasn't come across before. Serafal was stumped, as was her father. All their battles, conflicts, and talks they had never had any reason to believe that Menma was a water user in any way, shape, or form. This is a game changer. Maybe she can get Sona's arm back, or maybe reattached as they still have it in suspended animation, if she can come to a deal with Menma. Lord Cetri asks the Red Satan, "What kind of mastery?" Sears looks to the man who addressed him and began to explain. From what I am told, he was able to produce fully purified, high-pressure streams of water sharp enough to cut through buildings and defense walls. Change its acidity to melt anything it touches. Control the water's temperature and the free vapor in steam for attacks. That was crazy stuff to hear, even from someone in the Cetri house, and both avid water users were left perplexed about it. None of those were technically out of their scope of ability but it was rather a mana-intensive niche that most of their house would not bother with. Serafal made a mental note to try her hand at these attacks herself that the sage had performed later in a training ground somewhere discreet and out of the way. Lord Phoenix however was interested in the other person, asking, "What about this Natsuo? He is a sage that uses scarlet flames?" Sears nodded, confirming that as he began. Natsuo is a sage of fire and used uniquely crimson flames against the pure water attacks of Menma. Both seem to be on par with one another as you can see. An image of the four sages just after finding them in the small clearing in the forest and it is clear to see the wounded Menma and Natsuo clutching his chest as if in pain. Many were surprised as none have ever even landed a hit on Menma despite their best efforts and yet this new sage seemed to have gotten more than a grazing hit. Sears nodded at their stunned faces, understanding that all too well and spoke up. "I understand your feelings but it is clear that this Natsuo is a sage to be wary of." Zekrom cut in here, face pensive as he spoke. "Is it not possible to enlist him within our forces? Perhaps persuade him with riches or the like?" Sears shook his head, stating, I do not think so. Since their initial clash and now, it seems they have come to an understanding and are now standing together. Zekrom, like the others, frowned at the news that this sage is standing against them now too. Sirzex continued. However, it has also been revealed that he is married to this other sage. Gasps were heard as feet were returned to as the form of the bear Yukai appeared helping Natsuo up and the three children with them. Zekrom, and Lord Fenig's eyes glimmer in understanding as the redhead Satan announced. This is Aoi, a bear Yukai sage that uses earth attacks, and wife of Natsuo. She is also the mother of his children, Hikari, Tajima, and Itsuki. Seraphal squealed at the sight of the children. They were cuties with their big black eyes and bare ears that were black just like. She blinked as things clicked for her, and spoke up airily. Those children were born of two sages, right? Sirzex let out a tired sigh and nodded, replying. Yes, and already Graphia suspects that despite being in their single digits, they may already be on par with middle-class devils or higher. Ajuka and Falbium watched the same look travel across the small room and both shook their heads in disbelief or exasperation at the greed on display. Ajuka spoke first. I recommend not going anywhere near those children. Drawing all eyes to the researcher, whose shadow-covered eyes from lack of sleep seemed to emphasize his perpetually bored face as Falbium nodded and explained. Do you really believe that you could sneak into, and out of, a Shinto shrine where not one, but 4 sages are located, with a child under their protection? That seemed to reel a few in, but Lord Phoenix offered. Maybe a marriage. Lord Astaroth spoke next, rubbing his beard. Are they under the Yukai faction? Or are they separate as children of sages? That caused a few to consider it, but Zekrom spoke up. We should monitor those children. There is no telling what kind of potential they hold. Falbium shook his head, stating. As someone who has actually gone up against Menma, I disagree with that. His battlefield awareness is exemplary, his decision-making on par with any veteran tactician serving under me, and we know he has detected our distant viewing techniques. The longer the bold Satan spoke, the more the other Satans nodded along with his points, and the others were slowly being convinced also. Falbium finishes his contribution to Devilkind by saying, if you value your house's members, do not send them against any of the sage's children or give them any reason to fight unless you can take on one of us. He gestured to himself and his friends sitting on the ornate thrones before slumping back, face falling to his arm and falling asleep. He's done too much talking already. Sirzex took up the ball from his now snoozing friend, and faced the crowd. He is right. We cannot allow ourselves to be perceived as hostile to any of the sages moving forward. We struggled against one, just one, and now they have 4. Lord Gremory cut in here, arms on the table with fingers interlocked and covering his mouth as he spoke. What about this 4th sage? You have covered Menma, Natsuo the fire sage, and this earth bear Aoi, but you have yet to comment on this final one. Sirzex inclined his head to his father, realizing that he hadn't, and another image appeared for all to see. It was of injured Menma in the clearing, being hugged from behind by a beautiful woman with long white hair and a cute face. The image was focused on her as the Satan announced. This is Miyuki, a rare variation of the Yuki-Onna race known as the Yuki-Heim. Just like the Nekosho is to the Nekomata, this Yuki-Heim race seems to be a Senjutsu-enhanced race, and she is no different. None of the men present could ever say she was not an incredibly attractive woman with a great figure and beautiful face and smile. Her white hair was uncommon too, but what elevated her to the level must-haves was the fact that, on top of all the previously mentioned attributes, she was a super rare, never heard of before, Yukai, and was likely a maiden. The level of lust, desire, and greed had never been higher than when that picture locked in that woman. All the awake Satans shared more than a few looks of concern about the intention of the council, or more accurately, a certain Bael. Before Sirzex could interrupt them, however, Zekrom spoke up lowly. This does indeed change things. Seraphal spoke with a serious undertone, asking, in what way, exactly? The oldest devil in the room slowly met the female Satan's gaze, His mask of indifference was worthless as she already knew what Zekrom had on his mind when he answered. I shall attend this pact meeting with you all and make our position clear. If these so-called sages want to start a war, we should show that we are not afraid to take that step. Sears X hissed lowly. That would be a mistake. If the others side with them. They won't. Zekrom spoke dismissively, as if he had never been wrong on predicting the actions of those fools belonging to the other factions that opposed his. Leaning back in his chair further, eyes returning to the image of the white-haired Yukai, the devil continued. We outnumber them all now. For every angel, we have 5 devils to counter them thanks to our evil pieces. Many have sacred gears, further tipping the balance in our favor. He smiled, but it held nothing but sinister intent. Ajuka spoke next, eyes locked on the old man on the seemingly suicidal warpath, asking. Even with our numbers, just one sage was enough to fend us off. We couldn't possibly. Zekrom waved the green-haired boy off, replying. You are overthinking this, Beelzebub. Our numbers are our strength, only bolstered by our high amount of strong among said numbers. Any large-scale battle will lead to an excessive loss of life, which is something they will want to avoid. Serafal caught on to the ploy and did not like it as she replied tightly. You believe they will buy your bluff? Chuckling lowly, Zekrom asked. It doesn't matter if they do or don't, as it is no bluff, but a certainty. An outcome that we can bring forward at a moment's notice, unless. Sears X could barely keep a growl from his voice when he asked, unless. A calculated shrug as his fingers interlaced across his chest, Zekrom answered. Unless we have a reasonable gift to stay our hands. A gift enticing enough to perhaps cooperate. To show how genuine this pact is in creating stability among the factions. It is only natural, no? Worst part of it all were the house heads were nodding along with him. All beside the Gremory head, who had seen just how apprehensive his son was and knowing that his daughter was directly in the firing line of this soon-to-be conflict. It was on Ajuka's words that this emergency meeting came to a close. You're making a terrible mistake. Gregory headquarters Azazel was in his office, fist against his mouth as he stared blankly at the recently returned Benenmun, who had just given her latest report on the situation. The other high-ranking members of the Gregory were spread out across the room in equal states of disbelief and were trying to process what they had been told. After an uncomfortable silence that lasted longer than the receptionist would like, Azazel finally spoke up. 3 new sages. Benenmun nodded, slipping her long purple hair behind her ear, and stated surprisingly calmly. Yes, beside Narian, the original one, we have Miyuki. A Yukiheim and Sage of Ice and Wind. Then we have the married couple, Natsuo and Aoi. Sages of Fire and Earth respectively. She presented photographs of the foursome, split into their perceived pairs, and Azazel examined them carefully and asked. This, Miyuki, you called her a Yukiheim? Any relation to the? Benenmun cut him off, confirming. A Yukiona? Yes. Like the Nekosho or to the Nekomata. Yukiheims are apparently the superior form. Azazel nodded absent-mindedly, captivated by her beauty and soft smile completely. Thankfully, his cadre was able to break him from his admiration of her form. Benenmun speaking up. I suspect, however, that she, like the regular Yukiona, has selected Narian as her destined one. Which means. The Archangel of Lust sighed, knowing the answer, Azazel finishing. Anyone who tries will be frozen solid without hesitation. I got it, honestly I got it. Waving off her hardened orange-eyed stare. For a few moments it remained, causing Azazel to chuckle nervously before she nodded and continued on. Right, on the other hand however, the meeting has been postponed for an additional week or so. We have additional time to prepare. Azazel nodded but caught on to something his friend said earlier and asked. That is indeed true. However, I have to ask why you are calling the sage, Narian, now. Pushing up her glasses, Benenmun informs them. Well, seeing as the other sages are referring to him as such, I believe it to be the best way to gain a cordial rapport with him. Only the Nekosho had been using it prior, but with his deal with the Leviathan and these sages using it. She trailed off and Azazel nodded, understanding as he pushes. What about us? Has he agreed to anything? Benenmune smiled but shook her head, explaining. In all honesty, I have not pushed it. The devils had and were rebuffed. Same with the yokai. From the talks I have had with Gabriel, we both have agreed that unless we can offer him something concrete and tangible, it is best not to. Azazel could understand that as no news is better than bad news. Though, that leads to another question as he asks. What has Gabriel done then? Has she made progress? The cadre thought on how best to answer but just shrugged, Benenmune replying. Yes, but also no. From what she has pieced together from thoughts and memories, she and Narian got into a bit of an accident. The room itself seemed to raise a brow in confusion, curiosity, and intrigue at the same time, and the gleam within those orange eyes was telling. After few deliberate seconds, Benenmune continued. Neither side knows exactly what caused the incident, but Gabriel claimed that she had somehow managed to draw the sage into her mind or soul. Azazel gawked at that, unable to figure out how that was possible, and voiced as much. How is that even? The cadre shrugged, clearly in the same boat as everyone else. Benenmune continued. It happened when the sage was demonstrating a chakra technique reminiscent of the sacred gear, Twilight Healing. He used it to heal his wounds from a stray attack from Kuroka that managed to draw blood. Azazel leant in close, arms resting against the table and with an intense gaze as he asks, Are you sure it wasn't Twilight Healing? It was very clearly a chakra technique that held a similar effect to the gear. Benenmune explained firmly, and her boss pulled back slightly, arms folded, which allowed her to go on. While it was active, Gabriel touched it, and the next moment they were pushed apart by a brief but powerful spark of holy magic and were both dazed for a time. Azazel was trying to put the pieces together, wondering what could have caused such a reaction between the two, but was coming up empty. His cadre continued. After that, I approached her privately and asked about it. She told me that it felt like a dream with the sage and that they had watched the story of heaven. All the fallen in the room raised brows at that, sharing looks, and the tension spiked slightly. Azazel looked into those unquestioning eyes of his subordinate and asks, what was his reaction? Benenmune, however, looked amused at the tension and smirked knowingly. She took her time before responding, as it was amusing recalling Gabriel's pout as she retold it. Well, Narian claimed that he couldn't survive with all those rules and stuff. Now even Azazel smirked at that. The whole room broke into low chuckles, knowing that those rules were really stringent and cramping. If the sage was saying that, then maybe he could come to understand them and their plight. They had hope. The Governor-General of the Gregory leaned back in his seat, a large load off his back, and nodded to his ambassador to the sages, plural now, and asks. So, any idea of what to offer him? What did the Leviathan offer? Benenmune responded briskly. She offered him two things. The loyalty of her house and safe harbor within her house's lands. The other was training in dark magic. Though, I believe her display of dark magic wasn't actually for the training per se, but rather for something similar. Azazel too could see where she was coming from with that. No matter the training, the sage can't use dark magic, but maybe there was. He blinked, before offering. Maybe dark chakra. Benenmune nodded, adding. Most likely, yes. From what we know, he can use all of nature's elements. However, there are two that are, in his words, unique to him as a six-path sage. The intensity of the governor's gaze was expected. The purple-haired fallen mused, as he was an inquisitive man, with a thirst for knowledge that could only be matched by his libido as the archangel of lust. Azazel ordered. Spill it. What are these two unique elements? Smiling genuinely and a hint of smugness, Benenmune informed them. To us non-sages, we refer to them as light and dark. Azazel's eyes widen. The mere concept of, wait, chakra is a life force of nature and the yokai wielding. Wait. There has never been any yokai with light or dark chakra before. That isn't natural. Or is it? Wait. If the sage has it, then. Blinking as rapidly as his thoughts, his violet eyes lock onto hers through her glasses and asks, doesn't that mean Benenmune nodded, confirming. I do believe so, and it is also probably the reason that heaven is so interested in him too. Although he calls it yin and yang, the fact that his light and dark chakra even exists means that he is likely capable of creating life using it. Azazel looks like he had just came face to face with his maker as he uttered, "By Father's light, this, that." The whole room was locked in like that too, beside of course Benenmune, who had already had time to process the absurd fact that the sage, nay, Narian, potentially held the power to create and repopulate both heaven and by extension the fallen. She would admit to Azazel and maybe Barakil that she was incredibly hesitant about this assignment, but now she was grateful. She feels that anyone else would have acted rashly and impulsively, which would only jeopardize chances of a stable, prosperous future they could all have working with this man. This leaves the chief secretary to ponder on what to offer Narian for his cooperation. This undertaking was going to require thorough preparation and careful examination of all collected information thus far. Though, this also requires a gentler approach than most. Benenmune's quiet contemplation was cut off by the return of everyone's recollected mental faculties as she watches Azazel's gaze regain focus on her and he orders. Okay. This is a very serious development and something we absolutely cannot mess up. Everyone nodded to his words. The prospect presented before them was something they all knew they held onto and drove them forward. The governor continued briskly. Benenmune, you are to continue to get closer and enter talks with Narian as you see fit. I trust your judgment on this and feel free to offer whatever it takes to help Gabriel. Once that is done, explain our plight or whatever and just get his help with our own situation. Benenmune raised a brow at his use of her other name but nodded nonetheless and listened as he looked to Barakil and instructs. I want all our forces straightened out immediately. Shemazai, go with him. Do whatever it takes to bring the lower sets into line. Both men nodded firmly. This was no time to complain or be complacent. Azazel looked to Tamil and Sahariel and stated, find any and all gaps in our business accounts and track down any loose, incooperative ends and fix it. In hopes of earning later favor in our actions, try and reduce loss of life in any way reasonable. If it means sheltering the homeless, offering jobs to the needy, heck, if they just need a place to crash, just do it. We'll figure it out later. Both men nodded, allowing their boss to look to arm arrows and ordering, go with them and help as needed. This is all hands on deck and we cannot afford to slack off. Benenmune then asked, what of the paperwork? This all needs to be tracked and organized properly or later on. Azazel nodded firmly, standing from his seat, the others following his lead, as he informs. Do you remember those two I brought back? Abigail and Serena? The chief secretary nodded, so he continued. They are surprisingly competent and driven. All I will have to do is explain the situation with Narian and I have no doubt they will outperform themselves. Azazel grinned along with the others, all prepared for the next week of solid work. He finishes off by saying, so go and relax, Benenmune. You deal with things up there and we will deal with everything back here. Benenmune nodded hesitantly but did not reply. She likely has the most important role out of everyone present and she cannot be sloppy in its execution. Unknown location. The rain pours down of the red-cloaked sage within a muddy field. It doesn't bother him as he watches the rainwater mix with the blood-soaked mud and the numerous masked bodies that lay around him. Their life essence still dripped off his short blades at his side when he finally looked up, peering into the eyes of his newest tormentors. The ones he once cherished above even himself once upon a time. His face did not even twitch at their arrival, nor did his dull blue eyes lighten in their presence. The gray-haired man spoke first, voice tightened clearly. This is it, Naruto. End of the line. We can't let you run away anymore. The Uchiha sneered at him. He's right, Dobi. You know you can't beat us all. Don't antagonize him, spoke the gray-haired man, glancing back to the blonde's dull eyes that only seemed devoid of all life. He continued, Naruto. I know you are upset, but you are in a lot of trouble and I can't. Trouble, the sage finds himself muttering, His voice hoarse, telling of the trace amount of hope he once had left, had been doused. She, a priestess, had turned him away, claiming he was a threat to her and her people. That he could not stay there. Her vision had foretold of their arrival. The container's chuckle was hollow and grinding on the ears of those who heard it, but they listened to his words. You all betrayed me. Betrayed her. Now tell me, how am I the one in trouble? They all could feel the shift in his chakra, posture, and attitude. His eyes shifting from hollow and lifeless to fierce determination that he was known for, but more worrying was the slit nature of them. His opponent's leader spoke up, hoping to talk his former student down before they resort to their trump cards. You alone have killed more Anbu than any. I did not want to, sensei. The sage spoke calmly, dragging the title out with an overwhelming amount of disgust. He hated this man. Such a spineless thing that did not live up to his own nindo. What was it he said once? Oh. The blonde muttered into the falling rain. Those who abandon the mission are trash. Those who abandon their comrades are worse than trash. Your words, yet you abandoned me, shows how. The pinkette yelled. This isn't you, Naruto. Please, we can talk about. His eyes shift to her, cold and uncompromising, causing her to step back as an empty smile meets his face, but did not reach his eyes. I once gave you everything, Sakura-chan. You were the smart one. Do you really think we can talk this out at this point? She stepped forward again, her seal of thousand healing unraveling, which seemed to anger the sage as she replied. What happened was a mistake, but you shouldn't have run off. We are a team and... The sage snarled at her, but she remained standing, angering him further, as she bit her thumb and smeared the blood over her palm. Despite the rain, the sage recognized what she was doing and listened as she declared. I swear on this blood that I will bring you home, even if I have to break every bone in your body. The sage sneered, knowing that ploy of trying to use nostalgia to have him cooperate. She wasn't the first, won't be the last to try and distract him as his chakra began to surge through his body. His low hiss. You and what army? The pink-haired woman smirked confidently, which tipped the sage off just in time to leap clear of the wooden vines and chakra chains erupting from beneath his feet. In the air, the sage was set upon by ink-made birds charging at him with paper tags attached to them. A vacuum breath and they were shredded. The second his feet touched down, his chains shot out and caught the wrists of both Chidori wielders either side. A perfectly executed flanking attack from both the copycat and the Uchiha. Which meant that the next part was the medic. As predicted, the medic appeared at his front, fist cocked back and chakra rippling. A perfect distraction for the real attack from below again. The fist, chains and wooden tendrils all made contact at once. The power in the fist, however, dropped off heavily just before impact, making it barely a tap. For a moment, none moved as it seemed the fight was over. It was broken by the pinkette, who smiled in confidence. I told you we'll. She trailed off, seeing the smirk on the sage's face before a call out of, it's a clone. From their rear supporters, and immediately the medic turned only to be stabbed through the gut from behind, where the sage had appeared between his clone and her. She threw her elbow back, and he ducked, slicing through her stomach before leaping back, and again the second he touched down. Chains shot up and he leapt up clear of the traitor's grasp. A fireball was dismantled by his own chains, and the roar of lightning from above was concerning but not unmanageable. A blue flash followed by a yellow. The explosion rocked the newly expanded clearing. Within the center was the upper body of the fox, sealed within, only the head, chest, and upper body formed, with half its face reforming from the golden chakra. The sage spoke calmly. Despite everything, to think that my own so-called team is using deadly force. Said team suddenly felt nervous. None of their reports indicated the sage ever resorting to this type of counterattack. He only killed when cornered, fought back until he could escape, but this time it seemed he was fighting back full force. The spectral fox began to go through hand signs that none recognized, the sage within going through a different set, which is when the rear support gasped. Get out of there. The team ran, even the Uchiha through gritted teeth, but all paled when they heard. Wood style, deep forest emergence. The forest and ground all around seemed to come to life in anger, with wooden pillars, spikes, and trees erupting from everywhere and rushing towards the fools who dared anger their master. For the first time he saw the genuine fear in the eyes of his oppressors and knew that it was finally warranted. Amaterasu, followed by an explosion of purple revealing the Susanoo. Abruptly everything went blank. Wake up, Naruto, wake up. Naruto jerked up, covered in cold sweat and tears, breathing hard and in a panic. His eyes darted around the room but he couldn't see anything. That dream again. It's been months since he had it last. The memory of the last time his team were together. Suddenly a cold embrace shocked him back to reality and he locked eyes on a soft face, brown eyes looking back at him, both framed by white hair of the woman currently straddling his waist. He blinked again and the chakra invading his system registered with his mind as hers. She had forcefully calmed him and boy was he grateful. He nodded once and she ceased the channeling and brought him into a hug, that he returned instantly, greedily so, and buried his face into her neck, focusing on regulating his breathing. They stayed like that for an unknown amount of time, with Haku gently running her cooled fingers rhythmically through his blonde hair in order to comfort him. Over the last few days since coming here, Haku has noted that Naruto responds best to physical contact and displays of affection. Problem with that, however, is that his guard is always typically up and he never allows anyone to touch him without a damn good reason. She had overheard from the Neko show that Naruto normally flinched when touched by anyone but her, but even she knew that he just hid it better when she did. It took 3 days before he stopped tensing under her touch. Coincidentally, it also took 3 days before he would allow himself to fall asleep with her in the room. This was their first time sleeping in the same room and he seemed to have a nightmare of some kind. Just when she was making progress too. A quick glance around the room. The sleeping bag she tore apart to get him out was in pieces but presented a new opportunity. For now though, Haku will simply focus on stabilizing the clearly panicked husband of hers down. Blinking at that thought, she pushed it aside for now as it was far too soon to try and spring that on this panicked man who will never leave her. Another blink. He is hers and she his, but this is way too fast. Or is it? She lightly squeezed him in her arms and he squeezed back, causing a mental shrug within the Yukiheim. It's early days and he is slowly opening up to her. Only a matter of time, which is something they have a lot of. A mental giggle at the future she will bring to pass. For now just soft, smooth, and gentle fingers through his lovely golden locks. So wild and free. She will tame them too. Every part of this man is hers and no one will take him from her. Kyoto Mountain Shrine. The sun had barely risen when a childish cheer of, "Uncle." Naruto peeked an eye open as he broke into a smile when the 3 bear cubs came running over towards him and Haku in the garden. "Hey cubs. Up on time again I see." The 3 nod rapidly, smiling and hopping down like the children they were. Aoi soon appeared from behind the mess hall and spotted her cubs talking with their newest uncle figure. She smiled at that, knowing how much her cubs have wanted to socialize but couldn't. They had to be careful not to reveal themselves or face being hunted. Thankfully things have changed for the better. Between herself, her husband, Naruto and Haku, she doubted even gods would dare challenge them or try and get to her cubs. Even if by some divine miracle they get past her, doused her husband flames and approach her cubs. As ludicrous as this all sounds, but if somehow, some way they manage all that, they'd have to somehow outrun light itself to escape Haku and bend space-time to avoid Naruto. Absolutely absurd to think about. She was brought out of her amusement when Naruto asked her, "Say, Aoi, you seem amused about something. Care to share?" Aoi's black eyes meet his eternal blues and blinks, registering the question before she grinned. "Nothing important. Just thinking about how stupid it would be for someone to try it." It did not take much for Naruto and Haku to catch on to what she was actually saying, earning amused chuckles themselves and their nods of agreement. Haku offered, "I kinda want to see someone try. Is that wrong?" Aoi frowned tightly, but considered it briefly before shaking her head and offering, "I understand the desire to make them pay for daring, but putting my cubs on the line is a bit Naruto nodded in understanding, before standing up and asking, "So, where's the resident flamethrower this early?" Aoi gave him a look, something he has dubbed the "don't make me hit you" look, before replying dryly, "He'll be here in a minute. Honestly, you two are going to give me gray hairs at this rate." Naruto frowned, going to rebuff until Haku tugged his ear again and stated, "You both are the last left of your respective clans. Let it go." He growled softly at that, meeting her soft smile that did not even twitch under the noise or its implied threat. Haku knew he was just upset at having to work with Uchiha at all and did not blame him for his feelings, but they had to get past it somehow. Finally, Izuna shows up and immediately is locked in a death glare match with the Uzumaki, both their chakras simmering in preparation to fight. A now common occurrence. That has lessened dramatically if you consider their initial meeting's hostility levels. Again, both ladies interrupted them by yanking ears and breaking their barely restrained battle instincts that were urging them to shred the other apart. Haku had heard stories of the Uchiha being vengeful but did not know how spiteful the Uzumaki could be. Aoi spoke up with hands on hip, a slight growl to cowl both men. "This ends now. We're going to run our circuit and log help me if I hear one growl," one snide remark. She snarled, ears twitched and both men swore they saw a death mask at her back glaring at them both. Mama Bear hissed, "I clear?" Both did not hesitate. "Crystal clear, ma'am." Aoi nodded before pointing to the exit and ordering, "Good. Now move." As the group of 7 approached the gate, Haku noticed the distant gaze the seven-tailed cat but paid her no mind as she followed after the others in the early morning run. Just another parasite trying to get them to yield to their perceived power. Too bad the world doesn't work that way. Mess hall. The devils entered the hall for breakfast to see the sages already at their table chowing down on a lot of food, if the stacks of dishes being carted away by the staff or anything to go by. As the peerage took their seats, their king also notices how they were all in what she can assume was exercise wear, track shoes, baggy trousers, and loose t-shirts. Rias blinked. Those weren't track shoes but rather sandals. Just then Grafia arrives to serve their breakfasts and Rias asks, "Grafia, what is up with them?" Without missing a beat, Grafia replied smoothly, "They went on their morning 20-kilometer run." Rias hummed in understanding but Kiba asked, "But that shouldn't be too difficult to do with their senjutsu, right?" Getting nods from the others at the table but Grafia shook her head, stating, "They do not use any enhancements during the entire run. Just special weighted equipment and their body's natural strengths." More hums of acknowledgement as they spy on the 7 sages guzzle their fill with a strange sense of morbid curiosity. This is when Kuroka enters with a wide yawn and stretch but becomes stiff upon noticing the sages are already halfway through their breakfast. She then catches the eye of the Yukiheim and an intense stare down occurred. Though, the Yukiheim broke it with a sweet smile that pissed the Nekosho off and forced her retreat to the Yukai section. Akeno covers her mouth and chuckles daintily, offering, Era, it seems that our resident feisty feline has met her match. Foof. Rias and Kaneko nod to that but Issei speaks up, reminding all he was still around. It isn't a competition. Scary cat lady has the better breasts and nicer ass. He spoke as if an expert, nodding along with his own reasoning as if it was a well-established law of nature. The Gremory pawn suddenly found every eye in the room upon him, boring holes into his frame and making him feel incredibly small and helpless. Aoi was the one to speak for the masses. Devil-san. I can probably speak for every single female in existence when I say this, but those kind of comments and thoughts are best not said aloud. I am not ignorant of males' preferences or thoughts, however speaking them so freely, even more so in the presence of my cubs, will earn you a one-way ticket to the hospital. She was smiling the whole time, though when she clicked her knuckles in his sight range it lacked any warmth as she continued. Express ticket via pain. Am I understood? Pale as a sheet of paper, Issei nodded frantically as he seemed to deflate into himself with his peerage members pretending not to know him at that moment. Rias was flushed as red as her hair, face in both hands at the lunacy of her pawn's actions and the complete lack of tact he displays in regards to his passions. It was both a good and bad thing, as she was happy that he is returning to his old self, but bad because he now lacked filter and blurted out whatever was on his mind. His extremely depraved, perverted mind. Main garden. After breakfast, Yasaka and Kuroka head out into the garden, Kuno holding on to her mother's hand, and find the three adults seemingly instructing the kids in basic meditation techniques. Aoi was the first to glance over at them, and Yasaka would never admit how unnerved that bare Yukai analytical gaze was. After her once-over was done, as brief as it was, she looked back at her youngest cub she was coaching, or more like playing around, if Yasaka had to guess. Finally, when beside Narian, Yasaka spoke. Lord Sage. Both Naruto and Izuna look back to see Yasaka, Kuno and Kuroka. The two glare at one another for a moment before Izuna goes back to teaching Tajima, the fire user of the three cubs, and Naruto whispered to Haku he'll be back in a moment. Haku nodded, then glanced back over her shoulder at the three females and offered a smile, which really irked Kuroka and Yasaka, though the vixen was better at hiding it. Moving off to the side, nowhere near far enough to be out of earshot but enough for the non-shinobi to feel comfortable talking, Naruto turns to the three and asks, "Can I help you three with something?" Yasaka nodded first, asking, "Well, I have noticed that you are training Lady Aoi's cubs and was wondering if you could perhaps accept Kuno as a fellow student?" Naruto looked down to the suddenly nervous kid, hiding slightly behind her mother's leg, and nodded, replying, "I don't mind helping out whilst we are here." Kuno seemed to brighten up the area in response to that, but listened to Mr. Sage as he spoke again. "That being said, I am not entirely sure how much of our stuff will work alongside your own techniques. None of us use Jujutsu, so we can't teach you that stuff." Kuno raises then waves her hand around, drawing a tianshin to herself, and upon Mr. Sage nodding to her, she asks, But Mr. Sage, you aid that you would teach me the cool wind stuff." Naruto chuckled at the kid trying to pull a fast one on him, before replying, "I said that you would have to ask your mother, and only after you get good with medication." The youngest gathered puffed her cheeks, then stuck her tongue out before turning away in faux annoyance. It was amusing. With the vixens pacified, Naruto then looked to the twin-tailed feline and asked, "And for you, Kuroka-san?" Kuroka smirked, she arms propping up her sizable chest as her kimono was fitted properly these days and not hanging off her shoulders. She spoke softly. "Well, I too am wondering when my next lesson is. We haven't had one in some time, and I don't want to lose my apprenticeship for bad grades." Naruto thought on that, not even registering her less than honest intent, with his hands on his hips and gaze slightly skyward with a distant gaze. After a few moments he nods to himself, and locks eyes with the Nekosho to inform her. "How about this?" Getting all three ladies' attention, the blonde sage continues. "If you can keep up with our training all day tomorrow, without fail, then I will take you on as an apprentice full-time." Kuroka's breath hitched at that. It wouldn't be her forcing herself into his attention, she would have it anyway. Being the apprentice of the most powerful. Up. Swallowing nervously, the former stray cat asks, Narian. Not that I am ungrateful for the opportunity." She began twirling her fingers behind her back, actually genuinely fidgeting and growing nervous, much to Naruto's surprise. Kuroka continued hesitantly, "But, if possible, at least think about, maybe taking on my little sister too?" Naruto bit back the instantaneous rejection at the thought of teaching the still devil piece holding Yukai. No doubt, using anything she learned from him for their benefit and teaching their hybrid devils how to use chakra. If not use the research that Nibiria's clan had been doing into the transfer of chakra to devils from Yukai. Now there's a thought, he should mention that to the others. He let out a low growl, along with his tenants at that unfinished business that they should handle on a long list of problems that require their attention. Might get a decent workout if they try and fight back. The sage's sudden bloodthirsty glint in his eyes paired with the barely audible growl alerted all three females and the three adult sages, who look over and always swore if Naruto had a tail right now it would be slashing the air itself to shreds. He looked that pissed off. It took a moment for Naruto to recall the question and refocus on Kuroka, who had more than a healthy blush on her cheeks under his hunter's gaze that slowly faded as he blinked and replied to her earlier question. Your sister? You mean the Yukai, devil hybrid under the same people who tried to enslave me? Kuroka stammered for a moment before sighing and nodding, understanding where he was coming from, but she had to ask for her own peace of mind at least. But just maybe, so she looks him dead in the eye and presses. Is there anything you wouldn't mind teaching her? Anything? Naruto smiled, but it held no warmth as he asked. If I did, what do you think her masters are going to ask her to do when they get back? Yasaka nodded, agreeing with Lord Sage as she looks to the black cat and saying, Lord Sage is right. Once word spread that he has taught her anything, then she will likely be summoned to teach it to others. Things could very well spiral into war from that one act. Kuroka looked conflicted as she hung her head and nodded hesitantly. She obviously did not want to leave her sister behind on her hopeful journey to sagehood, but they were right. Narian's techniques are sage-level techniques. In devil terms, the Yukai equivalent to super devil techniques only usable to beings of that strength. If the underworld got a hand on them and a way to use chakra, things could be very bad for. Kuroka suddenly swallowed thickly, looking to Narian, who had a very serious look to him as he nodded. She then looked to Yasaka, who had a face just as stern as Narian's. In a surprisingly meek, soft voice that trembled slightly, Kuroka whispered, Oh. Naruto's smile was weak and unguarded, replying, It isn't that I don't want to, but rather I shouldn't, as I have no control on what happens afterwards. I have to be very careful as I know what happens if I am not. Takamagahara at the gates to the Imperial Palace stood Amaterasu, flanked by Hachiman and her brother Sasunu as guards. Unnecessary but more for appearance's sake. Due to that, Inari was also present. This was all to welcome the newly arrived in the form of two Olympians, Demeter and Artemis. Their guards, 10 hunters and their best by the look of things. As the Greeks arrived before the Shinto, Amaterasu spoke first. Welcome to Takamagahara, Lady Demeter. Welcome back, Lady Artemis. I hope things end better than last time you were here. Both ladies bowed towards this realm's queen, trying to keep their eagerness in check as they were now so close to being reunited with the sage of the forest and nature. Their soon-to-be savior and champion. The golden-haired Greek goddess of the harvest speaking for her party. It is an honor to be here and I thank you for this opportunity within your domain. Amaterasu nodded, understanding the gathering's objective and allowing her control over their projected future. She then beckoned them to follow, saying, Come, I have set aside quarters for you to remain until the meeting. Demeter, though, may have allowed her eagerness to force her to say, Lady Amaterasu, is it not possible to meet the sage now? I wish to at least. Glancing back at the Greek deity, the Shinto sun goddess, to stare at them blankly with her simple one-word response of, No. Unknown location among craters in a ruined forest. A battle rages on that shreds apart the life of the world and scarred the land itself. An echoing whine is heard and is followed by a call of quadruple Rashomon. 3 massive gates break through the wild forest and catch the dense blast of chakra that promptly explodes the defensive bastions. The rattle of chains, a sky-splitting roar of the giant fox, chained up and pinned in place. The sage within it growls as the purple form of chakra closes in, flanked by a slug and snake. This is Adobe. We're bringing you home, Naruto. The pinkette roars from atop her slug. The pale-skinned one asks, We're still friends, right? Kid, we can't break. The sage's face falls blank, hair shadowing his eyes as he whispered, I promised, right? Kid, flick me Kurama. Abruptly, the sage emerged from the avatar of chakra and lands upon the rapidly materialized fox's snout before he was then flicked up. All watched as he climbed higher than they had seen any prior, His hand reaching back and the familiar visage appeared, but this glowed bright red, swirling heat shimmering as he threw it. Lava style. Rasenshuriken. The ball of super dense chakra was not aimed at any of the attackers. No, their support team was holding his family hostage. No more holding back. No more pulling punches. No more. Seeing this, the Uchiha realized what he was doing and darted to intercept. The targeted decided to cut their losses and run, releasing the fox, who leapt at the snake and the Sannin riding it, jaws snapping down. The slug spat acid at the fox that was countered by a chakra-coated tail slapping it clear. Its rider jumped off and cocked her fist back. As the slug Sannin, her punch should be able to deflect a tail at least, and she roared. Shinaru. The tail shifted slightly in response to the impact before slapping her back, several times as hard, and the medic was caught by her summon. Whining winds drew eyes up as two more elemental Rasenshuriken were flung at the running support team, the Uchiha cutting through or shooting them down. The snake hisses as it is torn in two by the Bijuu, who roars and begins its infamous attack and took aim at the Sasanu. Before it could fire, a certain snake attempted to chomp down on the fox's neck, only for the sage to drop on it. It exploded on impact. Chains again managed to wrap around the towering fox, followed shortly by wooden pillars and dragged it down to the ground, roaring and pinned. Good. We have it secured. Now all that's left is. You will release him, Yamato. The sage whispered from the Jonin's back, causing the man to stiffen, feeling the blade at his throat, drawing blood. A glance over showed the very definition of a killer staring right back. It was clear the sage was no longer playing with them. Though, the former Anbu started to smirk, so the sage decided to inform him. Your clones are already dead. I know this is the real you, so don't try bluff me. The Jonin lost his smirk and began sweating. He can't move as he was currently suppressing the fox. Maybe if he... Abruptly, the temp member of the team dropped in, chakra seal in hand, but before he could reach his target another sage appeared and drop-kicked him into the dirt. Dazed, the pale artist attempts to get up but finds a kunai through his painting hand, a scream let out. The sage looks to the Jonin and states, release him or he dies. You wouldn't. Try me. Listen Naruto, this isn't. Last warning. Look, you are free of the fox, we can. The screams grow louder, the arm dangling limply at the side as the artist was thrown against the tree beside the leaf shinobi. The seasoned Anbu was shocked at the callousness. This isn't. The sage said one last time. Release him or he dies. The clone moved with cold, calculating efficiency as he picked up the blooded kunai and kicked the pale-skinned teen back against the wall, pinning him in place with eyes so cold, so indifferent. Yet the clone froze before glancing at the other Jonin present, calmly lowering the blade towards the pinned boy's neck. The silence was deafening. Naruto jerked awake again, panting and wheezing, clutching his head at yet another nightmare. Memory. Why are they all coming back to him one after another suddenly? The Battle of Team 7, huh? The fight that changed him the most. The one that laid the last of his hope to rest for good. Just as he went to swivel out of bed, a cool hand on his shoulder halted him, then the familiar heft of one Hikuyuki appeared on his back with her arms around his chest shortly as usual these days as she whispered softly, another nightmare? She hugged him tighter, flooding his system with her cooler variety of nature energy and calmed his quicker. Naruto nodded softly while replying. I think I'll take a shower and get some meditation in before everyone gets up. You can get some more sleep. Hiku shook her head before commenting. I'll come with you. Go ahead and shower, I'll wait here. You don't, Naruto began, but she just smiled at him and he fell silent. After a moment, he just nodded and then she pulled off, allowing him to stand. Hiku watched as her Naruto collected his training gear and headed into the bathroom. When the door shut, Hiku found herself blushing rather heavily at her thoughts. She had noticed the disconnect of her thoughts and dismissed it at first, but no, her thoughts are always pausing. After a deep, deep breath, Haku Yuki realizes that her Yuki-Heim side is rather possessive and near enough demanding to claim her fellow sage as soon as possible. We need to propagate our race. The world demands it. Enough. One thing at a time. First, become his pillar. Second, get a kiss. Third, get many kisses. Fourth, have babies. Hold up. You skipped a few things. Fourth, go on date. Get many kisses. Fifth, babies. You're hopeless. Haku's face was burning up something fierce while bargaining with herself. Kyoto Mountain Shrine Kuroka had never felt this exhausted before this point. For the last 2 days she has joined the training sessions with the sages and it's been torturous. Now, as she dined at the sage table on the 3rd day's breakfast, the cat heard something atrocious and finds herself asking, "Sorry, can you repeat that again?" "Oi, Izuna," and Narian looked back at her in amusement, the bear replying, "Well, Kitten-chan, you are doing well for the light training sessions the cubs do. It is just a warm-up for the rest of us at best." Now knowing she hadn't in fact misheard, Kuroka just returned to her food and began wolfing it down and missed the chuckling of the cubs, parents and fellow sages. She was also unaware that they were only partly truthful. It wasn't a light training session but the full extent for the young cubs, they just didn't want to give her a chance to gloat. Besides, the actual sage stuff will come later when they're less monitored and away from the eyes and ears of the untrusted. Plus, the Nekosho has to earn their trust still. Sages by default are untrusting of anything and anyone not a sage, and shinobi are paranoid to a fault by design. Despite everyone else smiling and chuckling, general positivity in the room, Naruto himself found himself yawning and not really feeling the same as everyone else. That dream last night really caught him off guard. Maybe he should meditate on it a bit more. Spend some time with his family. That should cheer him up. Yeah, that sounds like a plan. With a more natural smile upon his face, Naruto got up and moved off with his plate, bowls, and cutlery packed up tidily. He had to get to his meditation session. The others watched him and were slightly confused at his abrupt change of pace, beside Haku who suspected it had to do with his constant nightmares. Main Garden Naruto took his place beneath one of the sakura trees and closed his eyes only for the kid to rush onto his lap. Reopening his eyes again, he came face to face with young golden eyes filled with innocence and worry. Before Kuno could speak, he ruffled her hair and smiled. "You are too cute, you know." She tried to push his hand away acting like she was annoyed briefly but he still caught her smile of fondness, sensing it too. Kuno eventually flattened her hair out again then spoke. Can you teach me that cool meditation thingy?" Chuckling, Naruto patted the grass at his side and the young girl crawled off his lap to take the place indicated. He then instructed, "You remember the position, right?" The small kid nodded and taking up the position and posed just as the other sages all arrived and saw what their fellow was doing. Kuroka was swift in taking up position opposite the little kitsune and joining in. Haku sat directly opposite him, Izuna to the side with his kids on his right followed by Aoi. Inadvertently the adults had made a loose pentagon shape and the others all watched from a safe distance when Naruto spoke next. "Now, you have to focus on breathing softly and remaining relaxed but still, not making a single movement." Surprisingly, Kuno managed to get still enough to feel comfortable with but it wasn't good enough for her skill level. The cubs too were trying their best which only increased when all the sages began drawing on nature energy. An almost overwhelming wave of serenity erupted from them and swept over the entire shrine before bleeding out into the forests, healing the damage done during the fight a few days ago. It did not stop there as the wave continued through towards Kyoto and beyond. All that were hit with it suddenly found a sense of inner peace and contentment previously unheard of, regardless of race or alignment. Within the shrine itself, those present too found it the most peace within themselves and found a sense of peace they never thought they could. A clarity that felt like they had just taken off rose-tinted glasses. A warmth welling from within them that made them feel stronger yet calmer. Kaneko especially could not control her yukai features, her ears and tail popping out immediately and yet she couldn't bring herself to care. She was at peace and the recent revelations regarding her sister's actions were insignificant to her. Instead, she found herself purring and being drawn to the circle. Yasaka had the most experience with nature energy, but it was never this pure, uplifting nor filled with life as it was now. Her chakra was resonating with this nature energy and could feel her strength swell infinitely. Right now she felt like she could take on an army and not even break a sweat doing so. Magashi had never experienced such warmth and contentment before. It was so alluring and beautiful, thus felt no shame approaching the group of sages, then taking a nap beside the gathering. Nurarihyun was now satisfied. These beings of chakra and nature were the ones that will guide them to a more prosperous future without doubt. They had made the right choice siding with the Western faction and regrouping under a united banner. The devils were in awe at this feat. This wasn't what they had heard about when talking about senjutsu. They heard it drove Yukai to madness, drunk with power and rage, yet this is calm, gentle, and warming. Rias was at a loss for words, much like her entire peerage, and was now wondering if there was any way at all they could get this strength within the underworld. She was no censor, that was Akano and Kaniko's department, but even she could feel the overflow of life and warmth that charged the air at the moment. Looking down at her busted legs, Rias wondered if another sacrifice would work. They had tried to cage Menma and force his submission. This was her reward. Now though, maybe acquiring Menma isn't via force but rather friendship and maybe a full commitment of self to prove her earnest wishes to bring life and peace to all worlds. Grafia was very thoroughly impressed with this display and was in a similar mindset as her charge. The underworld could only benefit by allying with these sages, and it has been proven that force will never work. Political power is null and void as they belong to no faction with seemingly loose ties with even the Yukai, seeing as two of their members are humans, not Yukai. Idly, she wonders if it is at all possible for devils to gain this kind of power and what is required to reach the title of sage. Benenmune and Gabriel were just enjoying the suddenly life-filled air, reminding both of happier, simpler times of their youth and earlier days in the grace of their father, before everything went to crap. This performance had only solidified their desire to side with the sages for the betterment of all. Naruto leads the dialing back of nature energy as it had kind of spiked far greater than he was expecting, having not meditated with fellow sages like this before. He had only planned on a minor activation and monitor how Kuno reacted to it. Yet, with them all in unison channeling within such close proximity, the nature energy bloomed like a spring and burst out as if finally released. It was cozy. As for the young Kitsune, from what Naruto could sense, she had actually very briefly entered a basic level of senjutsu due largely to the abundance of energy in the area, but it flowed out swiftly as she couldn't manage it. With the levels near enough back to normal, he opened his eyes in unison with the others, and surely enough they all felt the same contentment he did. Well, except for Kuroka, who was bewildered and struggling to comprehend what she had just been a part of. She was staring all around as if she had only just gained her sight for the first time. Naruto chuckled lightly at that. He was the same back on Mount Myoboko when he first experienced senjutsu. Looking opposite to the kid, she too was the same but far more tamed, as no doubt she felt something briefly but was now trying to figure out what that was. Amazing. A new voice to everyone drew eyes towards the ground's entrance to find a group of women, 3 of which registered as goddesses, the others semi-immortals, and of the gathering of 13 females, only one wasn't known who was the one to speak. She had golden hair, intertwined with various cereal grain with a crown of woven corn and berries. A strange mix of a stern visage and gentleness, yet somehow made herself look more feminine because of it. She was wearing a green dress and dark cape, but the shinobi all caught the golden sword hilt on her hip. Naruto led the other sages to their feet, all eyes narrowed on this new arrival as he could sense nature within this woman and was subsequently on edge. Even more so when recognizing her choice of companions. Amaterasu aside, the other goddess was clearly Artemis, and those girls at her back were those damn hunters he had schooled back in Ko. As unlikely as this is to be a trap, caution should be maintained, and thus he fingered a kunai openly to display his readiness for another round if these so-called hunters are to be inclined. Seeing this, his fellow sages took up a prepared stance, with Izuna recognizing the armor of the kids from those two so-called guards, and thus rested his hand on his own sword handle. Haku too had summoned ice senbon between her clenched fingers and made no effort in hiding them or drawing attention, though that in of itself was what caught their eyes. This obviously did not go unnoticed. They weren't hiding it, and before any misunderstandings could escalate into the public consciousness, the Shinto goddess of the sun stepped between both parties and rose her hands. Amaterasu speaking swiftly. Sage of Sixth Paths, please stay your hand. Gaining the collective attention of all the sages, she continued. Allow me to introduce you all to the Greek goddess of agriculture, fertility, seasons, and sacred law, Demeter. The golden-haired woman smiled warmly, as if a spring day, and the subtle combative stances of the sages subsided. Okay. This goddess was basically the Greek version of them in some respects. So after a glance between the sages, Naruto spoke for them. Very well. You may call me Narian for the time being, seeing as we have 4 sages here, and calling us all sage is counterproductive. Demeter nodded, as did the other Greeks in attendance, so he continued, gesturing to his fellows from closest to furthest. At my side you have my allies, Miyuki, Natsuo, and Aoi. Sage of Ice, Sage of Fire, and Sage of Earth respectively. They all nodded at the sound of their names to highlight who was who, and it was a surprise to the Greeks that there were more sages than just the one now referred to as Narian. A truly wonderful day forward for the planet at the gathering of these sages. Stepping forward, Artemis inclined her head with her hand on heart and speaking formally. Lady and Lord Sages, my name is Artemis of the Greek pantheon and goddess of the hunt, wilderness, archery, maidenhood, childhood, and the moon. Izuna rose a brow at the names before looking to the blonde before pointing at the Greeks and saying, "Oh, she is the master of those two, right?" Naruto nodded casually, explaining calmly, "Yeah, that's her. Those teens at her back are her handmaidens and hunters. The ones I knocked about a bit. Put them at around mid-chunin, maybe high chunin level." Earning a contemplative hum from the Uchiha, eyeing up said goddess whose eyes hardened in response to his studying gaze and tensed up. Izuna found it amusing, chuckling at the sight of it, whispering lowly, "Interesting, indeed." Hidden Dragoon nest once again. Diedrich strolled into the throne chamber and the numerous Dragoon clan heads sat around the towering chamber. There were 2 types of these creatures that were like the Western style of dragons but with webbed feet, gills, sleek scales, and no wings but fins. The second type could be misidentified as snakes but more commonly referred to as leviathans. The one present was curled up lazily, watching from its corner of the meek, dimly lit chamber of solid sea bedrock, and its tail was dunked into a pool that may lead into another chamber. Though, as the redhead stood before the largest of these, dragoons, as they like to call themselves these days, seeing as their fellow dragons had rejected them, they built themselves on their new identity, and Diedrich didn't feel like pointing out the stupidity of it all. Regardless, he stood before their council. That felt more like a court of inquisition, not that he cared, and listened to their leader speak. As thankful as we are to hear the news of the return of a sage to the world, Diedrich of Redscale, but we feel that we have no business with them. This guy was the oldest and largest of the Leviathans. Due to that, even with Diedrich's sight couldn't fully make out his form from the dark recess he hides himself in, probably due to a magic rune sequence long forgotten or something. With those thoughts over, the Dragon Emperor just shrugged with his arms still crossed as he replied calmly, "Well, kinda expected that in all fairness." Eyes narrowed from the fools all around him. Clearly they are too busy worrying about their own perceived superiority and power base in this world beneath the waves of the vast ocean. Again, Diedrich cared not for their posture and stated with conviction, "This was my attempt to make a connection for further contact. Getting your cooperation would have been a bonus but honestly not required. Between my master and I, we have enough power to make the world take notice of." He shrugged calmly, glancing around at these youngsters and seeing traits he recognized within his previous actions. It was sad really, that powerhouses like them and him always seem to feel so secure in their power. Arrogance starts to blind them. Man, the others were right. As a race, dragons need a really big wake-up call. This world is their home. They need to help protect it and assuage its wrath before something unthinkable, irreversible happens. Looking back at the oldest of them, Ddrake's emerald eyes hardened to diamonds as he spoke. That is, individually. However, now that we are working together, we plan on correcting the problems and injustices the world's over. That sounds like a threat. One of the legged dragons hissed at him, a female by the looks of it, and the human-formed dragon looks to her ruby eyes with his own intense green. After a moment, Ddrake nodded and explained. No threat but a promise. As I said, this is me wanting to create dialogue, to make up for my mistakes in the past by giving you this opportunity. He shrugged again, clearly unbothered by their skepticism, and finished. So, feel free to continue with your deliberations, discussion, and talks as one day we shall meet again. Before they could respond to that, Ddrake erupted in green smoke of chakra and dragon magic, the excess traveling across the soul corridor back to the seal. His mission was done and message delivered. Elemental Nations. Land of Eddies. Stepping into the former cage office of the Azukage, one Gaara no Sabaku led another through the ruined doorway and came face to face with the two kunoichi who had already arrived there, both looking back with the red head among them speaking first. Ah, little Gaara, little Shizuka. Your presence here suggests that you are on board. Both newcomers nod with Shizuka speaking up. Yes, Lady Kushina. My people are currently settling down in the temporary housing you have set up. Though, I must ask, what is the plan next? All in due time, little Shizuka. Kushina chirped before looking back out at the ruined village of her home clan. In death, she was reunited with those who once called this place home and has come to terms with its destruction, but seeing this physical representation still pulled at her heartstrings. Perhaps, in another life, another time, another dimension among the endless possibilities she knew of as a seal master, she would have raised her Sochi among these streets, among their own, and under a sky reminiscent of this one. I have spoken with the former queen. Gaara began unprompted, bringing the returned kunoichi back to the room and the path before them, metaphorically speaking. She takes a breath before turning back to see the former cage, and upon her nod, he continued. She, along with Sasama, will meet us at the border on your orders. The best we can do, I suppose. Kushina muttered, though her companion offered calmly. What about the other of the Gaki's allies? The only other one I know of is a woman named Ishibumi. Gaara informed, looking to the gritty woman he recalls from his limited time within the leaf. He adds, she has just returned from Wave Country, so expect her report soon, Enko-san. Nodding firmly, Enko Mitarashi offered a half-smile while rubbing the deep scar over her abdomen towards her hip. Since her fight against Naruto, she has been laying low along with the growing rebellion. It seems that she wasn't alone in her thoughts of the Alliance's hasty decision in trying to subdue Naruto by force. Dude had been perfectly loyal beforehand, one of its biggest supporters and key members in the Team of Peace. However, the fear of the blonde had spiked after the truth of the war was revealed to the public. The knee-jerk reaction? Foolish. This led her to not return to the village after being nursed back to health by the tracking team of the former Sand Village leader. They had saved her, and ever since, she has been one of a few agents searching the list of people who may still have loyalties toward the blonde hero. When Gaara had recalled her and she came face to face with a woman who died nearly 20 years ago, Enko had given the woman a firm, yeah. Their discussion got really heated and really destructive. Now though, Enko, like many others, are gathering up under the banner of the returned Uzumaki matriarch and regrouping to hear the news. The world was about to end due to the blonde's absence. A threat he was supposed to stop was approaching in the form of the moon, literally falling from the sky, that will descend upon the world at some point in the near future, like really near future as in weeks and not months, let alone years. Yet, there is a chance of survival, and thus they had gathered under her call for them in order to save them. To serve alongside their friend who is still alive and well. Kushina turns back to the room at large and began to walk around the dust-ridden desk, her hand floating just above it as she spoke. It doesn't matter, if the others are late then they will be left behind. It cannot be helped nor can the time be adjusted to accommodate them. Speaking of time, Shizuka began and earned a smile from the Uzumaki who listened as the leader of the Nadeshiko Kunoichi, at least those who decided to leave with her, continued to speak. How much do we actually have to escape? With a hum, Kushina finished passing the front of the desk as she replied. Well, the moon will begin to descend on the orders of the last Otsutsuki still here on this world. The final descendant of the sage's brother who had remained hidden since his clan's demise. Frowning, Gaara folded his arms and said, "There is another one still alive?" "There is, he will soon strike," on his misguided way of starting over. Kushina confirmed as she finally turned back to the room as she stopped behind the old chair and finished. If things did not happen the way they did, I am told that my son and would have been daughter-in-law would be instrumental in avoiding this outcome. Curiosity piqued, Shizuka asks, "Daughter-in-law?" Her name was Hinata Hyuga. Kushina explained knowingly, before adding, "Though, her death has delayed things this much and the lack of my Sochi is the final nail in this coffin. The world is all but over." "Then, our escape plan is?" Anko asked from the window sill, arms crossed as she looks over the room before locking on to the mother of the Gaki. Just then, one of the young Uzumaki entered the room with a purple-haired woman trailing behind and called out, "Lady Kushina, Isaribi-san has returned." "Thanks, Kelvin." Kushina replied but was quick to ask, "Is the vault's resources secured yet?" "Samara tells me that it'll be done within a few hours." Kelvin reported promptly, earning a nod of gratitude from his returned clan head, who then looks to the purple-haired girl. Kushina asks, "Isaribi-chan, did you get them?" "Unfortunately, Lady Kushina, the sword that was supposed to be there was gone." Isaribi reports, causing the Uzumaki to hum and nod. "It was unfortunate but can't be helped." Kushina then asked, "Then, the other thing?" With a heavy sigh, Isaribi responded, "I am afraid the rumors are not just rumors. The family were indeed killed." "So, the Frost Village incident," Shizuka offered and got nods back in return as Gaara replied. A direct result of his rage at their actions. It was understandable. "How did they know about that place, anyway?" Shizuka asks, looking around the room before Anko began. "Well, you can thank the late Uchiha and the Hokage for that. They shared a list of possible locations the Gaki could have visited. Wave, obviously, was one such place." Frowning, arms crossed her voluptuous chest, Shizuka then asked, "Were my people on that list? After all, he had saved me too." Anko offered a slight nod and offered calmly, "Yeah, why do you think they ordered your involvement in the capture so often?" Even though the Nadeshiko beauty wanted to continue, she paused upon Kushina's raised hand that stopped her. After a moment, the redhead spoke. "That no longer matters. This world turned on its savior and all will face its consequences. Now though, we have to finish cleaning up here and prepare to move upon the signal." "Where are we going?" Isaribi asks, confused though it seemed to be the thought on everyone's mind. Kushina smirked foxily, a familiar expression on a new paler face, and said, "Right now, we are packing up and clearing any chance of the world to find out where my Sochi is. That is why I have my kiddos gather up everything here." Upon receiving their nods, she continued, "When that is done, and upon the signal from my patron, we shall move upon the last place anyone would expect us to strike." Eyes widened in disbelief, Anko's dark tone spoke of the place aloud. "The Hidden Leaf, why?" "Well, for two main reasons," Kushina says, leaning forward on the backrest of her late father's chair and clarifying. "Firstly, there is an Uzumaki temple on the village outskirts. We need to secure and hold it until we are called." "Called?" "Called." Kushina confirmed with a nod at the cage before continuing. "Our clan's patron is heading back to my Sochi's side and will open a path between us and him. Unfortunately, it has to be at a place he has influence over." Kelvin voiced thoughtfully, The temple, the temple. Kushina confirmed with a nod, then addressed. It also happens to be the last place he was summoned and makes this whole jumping world thing easier. Upon receiving shaky nods from the room at large, she continued her explanation. The second reason is rather personal. I happen to know a certain Senju who wants to give him a gift. So, I shall break into the Senju vault and retrieve everything they have. I will also grab the forbidden scroll and anything left in my own home too. Getting nods from the room as a whole, but Kelvin asks, what about the traitor? Surely we should. Leave her to me. Kushina orders firmly, not allowing anyone to challenge her on that, and the man nodded while stepping back. Land of Fire. Hidden Leaf. A full state of address had been called by Kakashi Hitaki, the 6th Hokage, and thus the entire village councils had been assembled. The civilian council, clan heads, the Jonin leaders, and even the elder council had gathered. The fire court and daimyo too were in attendance. Due to the sudden nature of the call, the 4 other cages and their respective daimyos were calling in via their new communication channels and were paying rapt attention. At the Hokage's back and side were 2 unlikely people, and the reason he has gone to these lengths to address the world at large. Clearing his throat was unneeded, but succeeded with gaining every eye present upon his form and allowed Kakashi to address them all. People of the Alliance. I have come across some rather troubling news. It affects us all, thus my calling of you here. Getting nods from some, he continued. As some of you have no doubt become aware of, but in the recent weeks attacks upon our positions by rogue elements and the underworld had ramped up against us. He sighs while giving a once-over, clearly not acknowledging that he and the other cages are aware of a more unified force forming between the cracks of their respective spheres of influence and hiding in plain sight, with plenty of suspects within even their own forces. Their goals were unknown before now, their endgame still remains a mystery however. After those thoughts, Kakashi continued swiftly. This however is no longer the case. For the last week, we have confirmed that these rogue elements had all seemingly vanished and pulled back from our lines. Our investigation has not revealed anything. Thankfully, our allies beyond the Big Five have pulled through. He gestured to his right where a certain light blonde, amethyst jewel-eyed priestess stepped forward and offered a soft bow while Kakashi informed. This is Lady Shion of the Land of Demon. She has brought us this information using her unique bloodline to see many possible futures. Many sat up straighter. The cage's eyes narrowed on this woman as if that were the case. Why did they not use her sooner to locate their foes before they struck? Seeing this, Kakashi elaborated. All these futures, however, are linked to her and those she is close with. That pacified his fellow cages. It was useful, sure, but clearly limited in scope. But that also begs the question. What has she seen from her lands to warrant her traveling to the Hidden Leaf, and who was she close with? The 6th to bear the title Hokage was not one to beat around the bush. Thus, Kakashi continued. We have managed to verify her visions thanks to our Yamanaka clan and confirmed her warnings of 2 threats, one of which is world-ending. Eyes hardened across the world at that. Another world-ending threat. It could only be one person, thus the Raikage was the one to voice it first. The Jinchuuriki. How concerning. Mei offered in response, but both Kakashi and Shion shook their heads, with the former clarifying. Unfortunately, no, my rogue student is not the threat but something else. Before they could say anything, Shion did. The moon will fall upon us within the next 2 weeks. Stunned disbelief was evident, with some shooting to their feet in befuddlement. How the hell is that real? Kuretsuchi, though, broke from her stupor and was the first to ask. Is there nothing we can do? There must be a way to prevent this. Perhaps the Jinchuuriki will intervene like he did with the Uchiha. Kakashi looks to his guest, who shook her head, Shion informing them. He will not. In fact, for the last few months my vision on him has been unique. Many rose brows at that for many reasons. If what they understood was correct, then this priestess has a connection with the rogue Jinchuuriki and has been watching him tear through their forces and friends alike. Why did she not come forward before? Seeing this, Shion decided to clarify. Let me say something about my ability. Getting nods from those around, though among the crowd there were those who were already aware of this. Included in this list was the likes of the former Team 10, seeing as Ino Yamanaka was the one to confirm her visions and inform both the Hokage and her team of what she had seen. From what I now know after arriving here in the Hidden Leaf Village, Shion began calmly, face stern as she continued, is that my visions on Naruto Uzumaki only started after what you all referred to as the Uchiha incident. Seeing the hostility towards her die down, Shion continued her tale. I was confused at first, not knowing what or why I was seeing him again. That however was fleeting as I have witnessed him battle against beings that call themselves devils. Many looks of skepticism, but the priestess was not deterred as she did not stop. He has fought against and was acknowledged by deities of powers we have never before seen. Brought down a dragon of red and green, forcing it to bend to his will. Many shared looks with their neighbors. Confusion over these statements was clear to see, and Shion did not blame them. She herself took time to accept these things as truth, though her heart accepted it immediately and sunk upon seeing him slowly falling into the arms of a woman who wasn't her. Clearing her thoughts of that for now, Shion spoke again. Naruto has defended his former foes, saved and nursed both civilians and shinobi back to health alike. Cut down would be assailants in defense of an innocent and pushed back against the injustice of powers beyond our comprehension. This all sounds rather far-fetched. Kuretsuchi stated flatly, earning nods from Ai and Mei. However, Kakashi chimed in here. I would love to agree with you, Lady Tsuchikage. However, I have seen these visions too and can confirm that she is not lying. But dragons and devils? Really, Lord Hokage? I griped, and Kakashi chuckled in understanding before offering back. If it were anyone else, Lord Raikage, I would be just as skeptical. It seems, wherever my student has ended up, he is not remaining idle. Be that as it may, May cut in here, drawing attention to her as she continued. How is this related to the world-ending event? My student isn't, I admit. Kakashi confirmed that with a nod before getting back to the matter at hand. However, from the information we have at present, he is likely to be the only key to our survival. Then, where is he? I growls with a clenched fist slamming against the table. This earned a tight sigh from the Hokage as he leans back while lazily gesturing to his left where the last loyal Uzumaki stepped up as Kakashi spoke. That is where Karen-san comes into all this. Upon getting nods, he continued. Many of the visions shared with us, certain details seem to be censored, somehow. We had no idea who or what was powerful enough to do so until Karen-san informed us of a single, critical data point. Something even we did not know of. All eyes looked upon the redhead. Karen spoke blankly to hide her own fear at this development. The Uzumaki's patron god, the Shinigami, is interfering with the visions Lady Shion is having. The death god? May gasps breathlessly, earning a nod from the Uzumaki present, but I growled out. That is a myth. There is no way. Unfortunately, however, Kakashi cut in here and drew eyes back to him as he continued in his calmly smooth voice. That leads into the second threat. It isn't world-ending nor is it aimed against the Alliance, but rather, the Leaf specifically. An attack? Kuretsuchi asked with a raised brow, and Kakashi nodded before saying, we do not have details. All the visions regarding it are either censored at best, blocky and unfocused at worst. We do not know who or what is attacking nor their objective. All we know is that before the moon drops on us, an attack will be launched. Kuretsuchi can be seen conversing with someone off-screen before she looks back at the camera and asks the Hokage. It may be the Jinchuuriki, no? Perhaps we should set an ambush? It is not my former student. Kakashi spoke calmly but paused, then replied. Wherever he is beyond our reach, and similarly, we are beyond his. You sound confident. Because I am. Kakashi quipped back and elaborated. I have literally seen him lead an army of human-like monsters against another far larger force. Beat a goddess of the forests, inside a forest. If he was the one to attack, it wouldn't be a simple threat but a promise. Mei can be seen being whispered to by a Jonin, and her face began to drop while nodding her head. When the Jonin moved off, she focused on the screens and reported. As troubling as that in of itself is, I have just received a report that a large group of kunoichi from Nadeshiko was spotted heading towards the whirlpool chain of islands. The cages all hardened their gazes beside Kakashi, who simply nodded as he clasped his fist in hand atop his chest and informed them. We too are somewhat aware of the former homeland of the Uzumaki people has been disturbed recently. Due to the shortage of Enbu teams in recent times, I could only dispatch a single team to investigate. The fire daimyo interjected here. Why have we not annexed those islands again? Looking to his boss, Kakashi informed them. Because, my lord, the island chain is protected by massive, everlasting whirlpools that cannot be traversed by regular or shinobi means. Which begs the question, Mei began, getting eyes on her lovely frame as she finishes. If these rogue Nadeshiko kunoichi are heading there, what are they looking for? I find it a little hard to believe they are charging towards their death. And with the fact that you, Lord Hokage, just informed us of undocumented inhabitants. Kuretsuchi added, and the others all nodded to that while the fire daimyo added. Then, with this Uzumaki here, can we not, I do not know, break through these whirlpools with one of your fancy ninja tricks? Not that simple. Kakashi reports and noticed Karen's untensing at his words as he continued. The Leaf is aware that there is a passcode of some kind to do just that. However, it was changed at some point and we no longer have access to it. Changed? By whom? The fire daimyo demanded, and Kakashi reported. Of that we do not know. Hopefully, when the Anbu team returns we will have that answer. I grunts before adding. And access to those mines of Uzu iron. Drawing eyes to him though, Kuretsuchi added. We want a slice of that too. It will really help us out. Assuming we survive long enough. Mei chimed in and subtly reminding everyone that the moon will literally fall upon them soon. I grunts again as he responded. That is a good point. That being said, my scientists have developed a new weapon, a chakra cannon. Theoretically, it could do the trick. Theoretically? Kuretsuchi asked with her fingers interlocked before her mouth, elbows on the table and managing a hard stare at, presumably, the rakeage. She, like the others, were likely highly concerned at this development, but in the presence of this larger threat to them all, shelving that concern for later. I, seeing this, pushed aside that too for now and continued. Yes, theoretically. Problem is, we don't have anyone with enough chakra to power it up, nor anyone who could give it enough to blast the moon apart. How much chakra could you possibly need? Mei asks with a brow raised, glancing around her own gathered council before offering. Surely, with all of us cages, the Uzumaki beside Lord Hokage, and perhaps. A voice familiar to Kakashi spoke from the Raikage's monitor, but she remained off-screen. Based off my scientist's current projections, even with all the cages and the previous cage, it would only just slow it down or even crack it. Kakashi offered back. So, what you're saying is, we need a tailed beast at minimum. With at least 3 tails, yes. The voice confirmed, getting a nod from I, who adds to her statement. Which means that, if he is indeed planning an assault on the Leaf. Sighing, Kakashi adds. Then, we have to do everything in our power to subdue and capture him. Shien's frown was visible to most though among the crowd. A certain Nara knew that such a plan was unlikely to succeed. He knew his classmate was not coming to their aid. Not after everyone had either turned him away or tried to capture him. Only after excessive political manipulation has Shikamaru saved the members of Team 10 from being among those sent against their wayward classmate. They all had given their word to him during his escape when he returned to his apartment and they ambushed him. Yet, this Nara knew that should they meet again, Naruto will be their end. Especially after what happened with Lady Tsunade, Sakura, and Team 8. This is all way beyond troublesome and he wants no part in this. Even if it means the end of the world. You do not agree, Lady Shien? Mei asks with a brow raised, bringing all attention to the priestess who broke out of her thoughts too and looked back to the Mizukage. After a blink, Shion responded. Nothing I have seen indicates that is likely to happen, but then again, it isn't unlikely either. Sighing delicately, she rubs her temples in mild irritation as she tries to explain. The timeline is in constant flux and I can't constantly keep track of the constantly shifting patterns. Sounds like more trouble than it's worth. Kuretsuchi replied dryly and the light blonde nodded absent-mindedly. Though, what the priestess has not told the others, even the mind invading Yamanaka hadn't discovered, is that of the near 200 possible futures there are only 20 in which the world survives past the 2-week mark. Of those 20, she dies in 10 during the attack on the leaf and so is unsure of the ultimate fate. The 10 remaining, she lives past the attack and is reunited with the Uzumaki clan, who take her before Naruto, and in 5 of them she dies somehow. Of the remaining 5, she is given a chance to work towards earning his forgiveness but is captured and turned against him by external forces in 4 of them, 2 of which she is captured by those known as fallen angels. In one of those ones she is kidnapped back by pure angels and serves alongside them but never meets him again. In only one instance does she stay at his side and in time earns his forgiveness. That one chance is what she is betting on and is her only hope, her only wish. This leaves us in quite the conundrum. Mei offered gaining everyone's attention as she leans back in her seat to explain. The Land of Lightning's chakra cannon requires a massive amount of chakra that we do not have. The hidden leaf is about to be attacked and we have a moon about to drop down on us. Kakashi nodded before offering. Lady Koyuki, if we gather all the shinobi, let's say a rank and higher, to help power this chakra cannon, will it be enough? Ai looks off screen, presumably at the former actress turned daimyo's wife, for a few moments until he nods and looks back to announce. It seems that it will only buy us time. It may be enough though, to figure out a longer-term solution. Wouldn't that also leave you exposed, Lord Hokage? Kuretsuchi asked with a brow arched, drawing attention to her as she offered. Seeing as you are about to be attacked? Perhaps. Kakashi confirmed with a nod before countering. However, our shinobi and samurai are competent to be able to defend their homes. Not to mention we are being attacked and not destroyed. The fact that the moon is falling is a far larger concern. How noble! Kuretsuchi retorts, though it sounded more condescending than complimentary. Regardless, we shall run the numbers and get back to you all. I bellows, getting attention back on himself. Keep your emergency channels open and we will send word when we have it. Land of Eddies. Uzashio no Sato. Taking a deep breath, Naruto smells a very familiar scent of a certain twin-tailed feline beneath his head as her human form's fingers ran through his roguishly long hair for a moment. Letting out a sigh, he asks. Mata, inviting yourself into my dreams now, huh? She giggled softly, looking over the beach of the homeland. Her host, only discovered when he was an adult, was now where they are currently occupy, even if is only in a dreamscape, with Matabi eventually replying. Well, with everything going on, I figured this would give us a moment of peace and quiet. Then she finally looked down at her host's comfortably resting face and offered, also, save you from having that cursed dream again. His hum carried above the sound of crashing waves and screeching puffins. After a moment, Naruto spoke again. Kurama taught it to you, right? This trick. He did. Matabi confirmed, just as he had already suspected, and got another hum. Even the Bijuu was enjoying this one-on-one time, allowing time for an escape from her siblings and private time with possibly the one she may or may not like. She wanted to be his only, even if the two-tailed hellcat knew for a fact that there were more than a few others that seek this too. Hussies, the lot of them. Matabi's sigh inadvertently drew his attention, so when she looked back down at him, her fingers still flowing through his hair, freezing upon realizing that he was peering back up at her. Before she could speak, Naruto did. It seems you need this more than I do. Again, before she realized what was going on, their positions had reversed and she was now resting on his thighs, on a soft blanket and beneath an umbrella. A perfect day at the beach played out around them and she found herself melting under his tender fingerwork running through her dark azure hair. Matabi felt no way about letting out the loud purr under his gentle administrations. She was definitely enjoying being his kitten right now. Oh, she could get used to this. Maybe, just maybe. Much to her surprise, her thoughts and subconscious mind seemed to affect the dreamscape as suddenly the sound of kids can be heard. Snapping her eyes open, Matabi jolted up and watched as there were a number of young children running around now too. It was easy to see what they were, or rather what they represented. 6 of them running around and playing with the water, or messing with a small blue fire and dead dry wood. They all had her human forms features mixed with Naruto's, blondes with her rippling patterns or spiky blues, but all had 2 tails. One of the young girls even had mix-matched eyes, one is blue and her green. Another young boy's had a blue and violet eyes. Her bewilderment was cut through by Naruto, who spoke carefully. Is this your dream, or mine? Snapping back to her host, more than a slight blush on her cheeks, Matabi met his soft gaze that moved off to watch the children playing. She noticed his eyes did not have any hint of disappointment or discomfort at the sight. Rather, it was rather forlorn almost. Just as she goes to reach for him, comfort him, she did not like seeing that look and wanted to get rid of it, but abruptly everything stopped. Confused, she looks up then around to see that time seemed to have stopped. Naruto's voice dragged her gaze to his form as he informed. Seems, I am being awoken. He looks to her with a truly heart-warming and sincere smile that Matabi would commit to memory, yet she couldn't say anything as they both returned to the waking world. Earth. Kyoto Mountain Shrine. Naruto, a whisper causing Naruto to open his eyes to find mellow, doe-like brown eyes of Haku staring back at him in nothing but concern. Blinking owlishly and yawning calmly, Naruto asks, Haku, what's? He paused upon feeling something wet on his face, hand rushing to his temples and finding tears running down his skin, and he uttered a simple, huh? You were crying in your sleep, Naruto-kun. Haku confirmed and he nodded confused before wiping his face. After a heavy breath out, Naruto swiveled out of bed and she asks, Naruto-kun. I'll have a shower before heading out to meditate, Naruto informed as he strolled towards the bathroom. Haku watched him until he shut the door behind him. She sighs lightly, looking out towards the window and out to the darkened skies. She wondered if she had made any progress in the last 2 days since those 2 goddesses had arrived. It was rather obvious that both had designs for her Naruto and she was not happy with them either. That being said, Haku was curious about his true feelings and plans after this so-called conference. Besides the obvious dealings with the main factions. What about after that? She still has her frozen tundra they could spend eternity in and watch over the world until they are needed again. Raise their family and train them to become fine people who cherish their loved ones. Give them the life they both wished they had for themselves. As her husband, he will want for nothing with her at his side. All she needs to do is freeze anything and anyone who dared look upon her husband's lovely form to earn her wrath. Just as her Naruto is known to do, she, Haku Uzumaki, his true and only wife, will never go back on her word. With the moon setting and dawn rapidly approaching, Naruto and Haku lead their fellow sages out towards the gate of the shrine to find the Greek party also there. The 12 hunters all nod to him, Jenny and Felix smiling at Naruto, who nods back. Artemis smiled at the arrival of them all too, especially the children who all looked ready to run despite the early hour. The eldest cub of the 3, Hikari, has become the maiden goddess's favorite and likely due to the fact that she is a strong and capable girl of 10 years old. Demeter is in similar gear to the sages, light track wear and bottoms with sandals on too. Her golden hair was in a high ponytail to keep it clear of her divine feminine face and charming eyes, in hopes of enticing her soon-to-be champion. Naruto, and all the adults' ages, have obviously noticed the same thing in regards to the agricultural goddess of Greek descent and have all chosen to ignore it. Sure, she is comfortable for them to be around, but that doesn't grant her access to them on that basis alone. Finally, Kuroka arrived to the gathering only to be followed by her sister, Kaneko, the bishop, Asia, the knight Kiba, and the queen, Akeno. Why the hell are they here? No doubt their king would have come too if her legs were working. Sighing hard, Naruto gave Kuroka a meaningful look and she knew immediately that she was now in charge of the devils. After that, the group all head off on their warm-up laps before breakfast. Naruto had given the hunters and goddess access to the Fuinjutsu-powered weighted bands. A gesture of good faith. They were impressed so much that they had requested a trade that Naruto is still thinking about. They wanted a few more impossible additions to their standard issue armor. Main garden. After the hearty breakfast, the sun was up and another lovely day was upon them, which told Naruto that the Shinto gods had a hand to do with it. He was the first to return to the garden after his shower and came across a calmly sitting Rias Gremory beneath his favorite sakura tree. She had a book in hand and she was reading. On closer examination, it was a picture book of some kind and written in the local language. Shrugging, he was about to move towards a different tree when a voice at his side drew his attention. "Excuse me, Menma-san." Eyes lock on to the white-haired devil maid. Her light blue and white French maid attire was pristine. Not that Naruto knew or cared about such things as he responded. Grafia-san, right?" Upon her nod, he asks, "What can I do for you? This may be in bad taste, Menma-san. However." She bows lightly briefly, confusing the sage, but as she stood straighter, Grafia asks rather boldly, "May I ask for the return of the 2 bishop pieces of the Nibirius house that you have acquired from Kuroka-san?" Naruto looked at her blankly for a long moment, unsure if she was being serious or not. His entire beast council wore the same blank deadpan he had, unsure what to make of such a bold and clear line crossing. It must have been around the 2-minute mark before Kurama finally spoke. "Kit, did I hear that correctly?" "I don't know," Naruto replied internally, still staring blankly at this slaver before him, though he did add after a moment, "Should I ask for her to repeat herself?" "I think it would be wise, Naruto boy." Yuki responded and got nods from everyone, even Diedrich, who was still somewhat in shock at the level of arrogance that question must have taken to make. After a deep breath, Naruto asks this maid one more time to be sure he, nor his 10 beasts, misheard. Grafia-san, did." He scratched his head in confusion and a slight case of embarrassment of the second-hand variety before sighing breathlessly. After a moment, he looks back at her and asks, "Are you being serious right now?" Without missing a beat and with zero hesitation, Grafia nodded and replied, "I am willing to trade for them." "You have nothing to offer me." Naruto snipped coldly, eyes become as frozen as the hidden northern tundras his fellow sage calls home. Though, Yuki realized something and posed. "Wait, Naruto. There is something you can ask for." This caused Naruto to raise his hand externally to pause the devil's response as he began to act like he was thinking on things while actually focusing on the 8 tails, asking him, "What do you have for me, Yuki?" "That family name they just use. Nibirius, I think it is." The octopus began slowly and the others nodded, so he continued. "Should we not ask for the research notes they took on chakra and senjutsu? That is no guarantee they won't make copies." Kurama replied with a grunt and Diedrich nodded before adding his own. "They would never let that knowledge go, now that they have it. That is something we will have to ensure by force. The only language they truly understand. Who's to say they aren't already utilizing it?" Son Goku chimed in with his arms crossed, drawing eyes to him as he stargazes with one foot up on his knee and continuing. "Think about it. How long ago did that kitten flee? Surely someone else has picked up the research notes by now." "True." Shukaku responded with a nod, surprisingly thoughtful before his maniac expression returned as he declared, "We should just murder them all for good measure." The mental clearing was suspiciously quiet for a long time after that. The most surprised was the Tanuki, as no one has actually told him. Know this it for today, guys. This was the part 10 of What If Naruto Was the Jinchuuriki of 9 Bijuu X Highschool DxD. Stay tuned for more.